truce was agreed following negotiations in Moscow. However, both sides have already accused the other of violating that ceasefire. France 24's Catherine Norris-Trent reports now from Barda in Azerbaijan.
We arrived in this area known in Azerbaijan as the contact line, previously the front line between Nagorno-Karabakh and Azerbaijan, in late afternoon to try and find out more about whether the truce that has been negotiated in Moscow is indeed holding. Now, what's striking for us coming here is that in previous days when we've been working along this road, we'd heard the sound of frequent shelling coming in and going out. And right now, the shells have fallen silent. We haven't heard a single one since we arrived. And we've been asking local people living in these villages here what they've seen since the truce was announced.
Yok, bugün yok.
Biraz sizi rahatlattı mı?
Rahattı bugün, ha.
Torpağımızı isteyirik. Yani danışıklarla yola gelinməsə, müharibə yolu ilə də olsa biz torpağımızı alacağıq. Qarabağ bizimdir.
According to our sources, the humanitarian operations this truce was designed for, retrieving prisoners of war and dead bodies on both sides, has not yet started. The conditions are not yet in place, we are told. But back in Baku, the Azeri authorities are presenting this truce as a victory, the first step, they say, in forcing Armenia into peace.
France 24's Catherine Norris-Trent reporting for us from Barda in Azerbaijan. Let's take you now to Gulliver Cragg. He's in Goris in Armenia. Gulliver, hello to you. Firstly, how's the ceasefire being received there?
Well, people in Goris are very anxious, of course, for this fighting to stop. There are numerous people who fled the fighting in Nagorno-Karabakh who've come to Goris and they would like to go home. People are watching for news on their TV sets and listening for news from people who've come from there. I spoke on the telephone to some people who are in Stepanakert, the capital of Nagorno-Karabakh, and they said that there was shelling throughout the morning until noon, or a little after noon actually. The ceasefire was supposed to come into effect at noon local time, and it more or less did in terms of the shelling and bombardment of towns and cities in Nagorno-Karabakh, it seems. People in Stepanakert did not report any shelling during the day, but the Armenian Defense Ministry and journalists in Stepanakert that I spoke to said that there was still fighting along the front line. The Armenians accused the Azerbaijanis of starting an attack along the front line just after the ceasefire was supposed to come into effect. So in terms of actual combat between the two opposing forces, I don't think the ceasefire is really holding. In terms of attacks on civilian areas, it seems to have held throughout most of the day, but one resident of Stepanakert I spoke to a little earlier said that as it got dark in the evening, aviation from the Azerbaijani side was seen and heard in the sky above Stepanakert, and he said that's often a precursor to renewed shelling or bombing from drones. So people in Stepanakert are very anxious. They said that it was not at all like a normal day where people went out and felt more relaxed than they had been in previous days. People were still staying in shelters most of the time and not really very confident about this ceasefire holding for very long. And also the Red Cross the International Committee of the Red Cross have not been able to start their assistance to the operation of exchange of bodies and prisoners. The logistics have not been able to be worked out yet, I think because the ceasefire is still too fragile.
All right, France 24's Gulliver.